Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. The modern game I want to look at today is Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village. I've been reviewing the Resident Evil franchise on this channel. I love it. I think it's really fun, and I think Resident Evil Village is a beautiful celebration of the entire franchise as a whole. I love what it does with the game. I will be talking minor spoiler details here, talking about some of the sections in this game. I won't go into detail about them, but I will tell you what the sections are. And then some minor story stuff at the beginning of the game. So if you were worried about that, please go play the game first. But I won't be doing anything story related, like anything major at least. I'll be doing stuff that I'll be talking about story stuff that happens early on in the game, and then the sections that you get into later on. So with that out of the way, let's get into what makes Resident Evil Village so good. First and foremost, you start off as Ethan Winters, following the events of Resident Evil 7. Seven was originally, I believe, was supposed to be a like standalone experience, and that they were going to bring in like Chris Redfield at the very end and then tie it back into the main story. But people really liked Ethan Winters, and they decided they had some more story to tell, so they continue on his story specifically in this one. He's been relocated to Europe with his family, his wife Mia and their daughter Rose, and they're very happy. They've had some traumatic events that happened with Resident Evil 7, but they're trying to figure things out together, and they're having a pretty lovely time. Until Chris Redfield and his team bust down the door and guns down Mia in front of Ethan and takes Rose away and takes him as well. It's a pretty horrifying start to a game. I think this is probably the most shocking of any of the Resident Evil games for sure. It's pretty terrifying. It's pretty hard to watch them just gun down Mia in front of Ethan. He asks what's going on. Chris won't tell him. And as they drive away, they careen off the road. He's all by himself, can't find Rose or the other teammates. He goes through the brush, and it's very dark and terrifying. Every sound is really scary until he comes to this village. And it's daytime, which is an interesting choice for like a horror video game. But just like Resident Evil 4, it capitalizes on the kind of surprise aspect. He makes sure to capitalize and make things scary in a very different way, which I think is very cool. You immediately run into some werewolves early on, which is the main villain, enemy of this game, the main enemy you'll fight. Whereas like in Resident Evil 7, you have the molded, you're going to run into some werewolves more often than not. And one of them gnaws off some of your fingers. You have that for the rest of the game where you're missing fingers, which is funny because in Resident Evil 7, you could chop off an entire limb and then just get him back on with your magic healing juice, but apparently Ethan doesn't have that at the moment, so he loses some of his fingers early on. He meets some of the villagers. Things are clearly going wrong. He has to fight for survival throughout the entire village until he finally makes it to the Castle Dimitrescu, which you see in the promotional material. This is the main hype of the promotional material, and it really captured a lot of intrigue from me as well. You have Lady Dimitrescu, the main antagonist of the castle, and her daughters that trap you and want to toy with you and play with you until they kill you eventually. It's a really scary place to be. The castle is very reminiscent of the Spencer Mansion, which is awesome. Resident Evil Village feels like a celebration of the series in that it takes aspects from other games and puts them into this one and kind of molds them all together. So this one kind of takes place in like a Spencer Mansion-esque place in this castle, and has Lady Dimitrescu, who is constantly following you, so very Jack Baker, Mr. X, Nemesis. You are going to be running from her constantly throughout this castle. In fact, one of the earliest escape sequences you have is just trying to get away from her with little to no ability to fight back, which is absolutely horrifying. The way this game starts off is so strong, and it remains scary throughout the entire experience. But after you finish the Dimitrescu Castle, that seemed like it was going to be the main hook of the game. People assumed that this was going to be the game itself. So when you finish it fairly early on, you're kind of at a loss thinking, what the heck's going on? I thought the game would be longer. Well, it is. It's significantly longer. That was just the first main section. Turns out that there are these four like sentinels, these four guys that kind of helm each main area and serve as the final boss. So Lady Dimitrescu is for Dimitrescu Castle, and then you have three other areas to explore. One of them is a creepy dollhouse area where it's full to the brim with terrifying things to go through. You are very defenseless throughout the entire experience. Probably the scariest aspect of the entire game is going through this area. You have another area that is very water themed. It feels very Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil, the dollhouse area feels more like, oh man, I'm just trying to remember what I thought about. I can't remember my direct correlation here, but it's very claustrophobic. It's very scary. You have to run much more than you have to fight back. Resident Evil, the water area feels very much like Resident Evil 4 in terms of like the lake area. It feels like there's a lot of elements that they're shared with Resident Evil 4. You also have something later on with a more mechanical area that's very action focused, feels very Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 4. It's nice how they kind of pair all of the original games together into a really nice package. Doesn't always work as well. There are definitely some sections that kind of lose me as the game went on. Like the first 2 sections, I think, of the game with the Domitresk Castle and the Dollhouse are absolutely terrifying. They capture the horror aspects of the genre and do a great job of making you feel more helpless, and it's really scary. The water area is also very good. I really liked it. I like the main enemy. It's really cool. The main boss is really fun. I like the story details that unravel there as well, but you can start to see it kind of lose its scary momentum and turn more into an action-focused thing. Like I said, this is a celebration of the Resident Evil franchise, so it's not a terrible thing. Action is a big part of like Resident Evil 4 and 5 especially, and then Resident Evil 6 later on, but it just feels less scary the further you get into the game. The same thing goes for the next area that is very action-focused with a very action-heavy boss. Probably the weakest boss in the game as well. It's not that this section is bad. I actually had a lot of fun with it. It's probably one of the longer sections though, and because it's not nearly as scary and focuses on gunplay and all of these other things, you start to lose kind of what made the beginning so strong. And it seems like they focused on the promotional material of marketing Lady Domitresk because they knew that was going to be one of the scariest parts of the game and probably the best section of the game. But the main characters, the main bosses that you fight in the other areas are still cool and interesting. They just kind of lose their steam as you progress throughout this game. And then culminating to the final showdown, that one's really fun. Again, I'm not going to spoil that here. That one's pretty good. I like the twists and turns that go along with the story and figuring out what the heck is going on with your family and what's going on with Ethan, what's going on with your child that's been abducted. It's very interesting lore-wise. I actually think this is one of the strongest stories that they've told because it is a longer experience. They have lots of intrigue. You figure out lots of twists and turns along the way. Ethan has to grapple with a lot of new things. One of the best features of this game is the Duke, who acts as the merchant in this game. Feels very Resident Evil 4-esque. I like how many elements they borrowed from that game since it is the best in the series. Resident Evil 4 had the mysterious merchant. He's the coolest NPC, and the Duke feels very, very similar, but in a very unique way at the same time. He sets himself apart from the merchant from Resident Evil 4 in great ways. He's this really large guy that has his own little like traveling shop. He sets up shop in the castle at one point. You'll find him at various places throughout the game, and then he's always got his headquarters there. It's mysterious how he gets around. You don't really understand his motives here in helping you. It's just like the merchant from Resident Evil 4 in that respect, and I like that. I like that he just has an air of mystery to him that you don't really understand what his motives are, and he offers you a lot of help. He also offers like little side quests for getting certain foods that you can get, like if you can kill specific animals that are prized versions, so you can get their meat that are better for selling or for combining for recipes and stuff. Fun little side content that I really enjoyed doing. I liked going off and finding the secrets and finding the areas where you could get the main fish that's going to net you the most profit to get some more upgrades for your character. I think those side quests are actually pretty good. The world exploring in first person isn't the best. I think third person exploration is a little bit better, but it works pretty well in Village. Overall, I think the package is very, very strong. It has some weaker elements, unfortunately, toward the latter half of the game, but it still remains fun, which is great. That's what you want out of a game. You want it to be fun and interesting. The fact that it isn't nearly as scary is kind of typical of a Resident Evil experience. You get stronger as the game progresses, you get more weapons, you're stockpiling your ammo and everything. And by the end, you're kind of a walking powerhouse. You definitely feel that in Resident Evil Village. And it doesn't feel as good the less scary it gets, but the early stuff is so strong and the late stuff isn't bad, so you still have a really good time. I think the overall package is great together. I like what they did with this. I think the story elements are awesome. I think it's maybe a little bit too long. I think they could have trimmed the fat here and there, but overall I really enjoyed Village, and I like the implications going forward for Resident Evil 9. I'm excited to see what they do with the storyline. I think it's going to be really fantastic. So I'm going to give Resident Evil Village a gold ranking. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.